Jacob Misiorowski was once exciting, but not very good. He threw at the 2022 MLB Draft Combine in San Diego, a lanky dude from Crowder College in Missouri. He walked 14% of the batters he faced in the minors, which is, not very good. And now he's the best pitcher in baseball. Kyle Harrison was once exciting, but also not very good. He had a career 4.4 ERA from 2023 to 2025 in almost 200 innings. Now he too is a top 25 pitcher in baseball. Trevor McGill has saved 61 games since 2024. He was DFA'd by the Twins, and the Brewers acquired him for cash. Quinn Priester was awful with the Pirates. He was then awful with the Red Sox. And last season with the Brewers, he was a 2-WAR pitcher in 160 innings. It's a simple question with a complex answer. How do the Brewers continue to make so many pitchers better? Let's get to the bottom of it. My first step in this investigation was to ask for thoughts from sources on what makes the Brewers different. And I got a variety of answers. And to be honest, a lot of them kind of felt like BS. There was a lot of they don't miss details and they're just good at all aspects of development, but that really means nothing to me. I got the honest admission from a few people I respect that they didn't really have a feel why the Brewers have been so good, which is probably the correct answer. Otherwise, teams would be better at copying them. So let's pull on a few threads of development within their most prominent success stories. Jacob Misiorowski could not throw strikes. That combine bullpen of his was fun, but it was extremely erratic. The Brewers didn't care. They took him in the second round in 2022. 1.5 years in the minors, he struggled with walks, and then we saw a breakthrough during the middle of 2024. He changed from a slider to more of a cutter, and his zone rate, particularly to left-handed hitters, jumped from oh no territory to this might actually work. Speaking with people in the Brewers organization prior to 2025, I got the sense that they were never internally over a 50-50 chance that Misiorowski would end up a true starting pitcher. Command is such a difficult thing to project and to improve that taking this more probabilistic approach around a pitcher's role is really the only way to do it. And I echoed what I heard. In my preseason 2025 prospect list on my Substack, I said that I shouldn't be projecting command improvements with confidence. And that was in Misiorowski's blurb. But the what do you get when you win payoff with Miz was huge, and the Brewers absolutely nailed it. The systematic way to improve command is with heavy central targets before 2 strikes, something the Tampa Bay Rays made very popular, and mandatory bridge breaking balls. Beyond that, it becomes a game of test-retest with individual pitchers' mechanics and the mental game. Misiorowski's command improvement comes down to a combo of this bridge breaking ball element plus body maturity, but the later's kind of hindsight bias. Every player's body is going to mature, but there's not really a correlation between that happening and command improving. Otherwise, we would have a lot of pitchers who could command the ball, and we don't. What's really striking about Miz is the freshman to sophomore year leap in MLB that nobody saw coming. His four-seamer jumped over 1 mile per hour, from 99 miles per hour to over 100. And that pitch is so good, he's throwing it more than last season as the rest of the league fades four-seamers. He's also started to dabble with variants of that bridge breaking ball, going to a slider and a cutter. Long-term, he'll be able to add a sinker and lengthen out that slider even more. Yes, I'm saying he can get even better. Now, Kyle Harrison is similar but different. He has a really strong fastball foundation like Miz, which is essential to being a good starting pitcher in the majors, but the discourse around Harrison was always, this guy needs a new breaking ball. And that's exactly what the Red Sox thought. They gave him a cutter, they had him throw fewer four-seamers, and that prompted this text from a league source earlier this year that made me chuckle. Boston got Harrison and had him throw fewer fastballs, which in and of itself is bat bleep. The Brewers removed that cutter and leaned into the best pitch that he's always had, his four-seamer. The larger adjustment with Harrison was movement on the rubber, which I've talked about in other videos as a way to play with a pitcher's direction down the mound and potentially influence his arm angle. Harrison is landing slightly more open this year, and yeah, the fastball execution score improved dramatically, like so much that it's probably the best imaginable example of that third very large bucket that I mentioned when improving command, the test-retest with individual pitchers' mechanics. This leads us to the concept of individualization, which is the most overused word in player development. You talk to 99% of people on the development side about what they do as an org or even a coach that is better than other orgs or coaches, and they will tell you some form of we coach to that player's needs or we're very focused on the needs of the individual. And that just can't be true because we have a wide range of outcomes from org to org and how they make players better. The reality is most organizations suck at this. In modern baseball, models are the brains of any operation, ingest reams of information, output projections and tools, and use those to guide decision making. This is where organizations show tendencies when you zoom out and look at numbers from an org level. The Dodgers love velocity. Everybody loves velocity, but they love it a lot. The Rays love really small mixes in the minors and big zone rates on their sliders. The Marlins hate throwing four-seam fastballs. The model identifies what is good or undervalued, and teams align directionally to that goal, which is the layer below the goal of create good starting pitchers. The Brewers' internal model, which I've heard is called the keg, or at least that's what the players interact with. The portal is called the keg. Now, from an outsider's perspective, theirs seems to be driven by sinkers and cutters, tangential to the three fastball approach we've heard a lot about, and Foolish Bailey did a really good video on. The Brewers have been top 5 in MLB cutter usage in each of the last 5 seasons. They're also top 5 in both sinker and cutter usage in the minors. Quinn Priester learned a cutter from the Red Sox. The Brewers had him throw it more. Chad Patrick had one with the Athletics. The Brewers had him throw it more. They're not always the originators, and that's totally fine. A blanket approach is smart only when you can identify the players that don't fit under that blanket and properly address them as individuals. And Kyle Harrison is the best example of this in the Brewers organization. A lot of orgs do not have a blanket approach, and they try to individualize everything. And as a result of that, they're incredibly resource constrained, and it's not really scalable for the most part. There's other orgs that take the blanket approach, and they just relentlessly do that. They don't do a great job of the individualization side. I actually think this can work for a lot of organizations, but what you run into is the Kyle Harrison situation, where he goes to the Red Sox, throws a bunch of cutters. Now, you would think the Brewers would take Kyle Harrison and go, hey, we like cutters as an org. We throw a bunch of those. But Kyle Harrison didn't fit under the blanket, so the Brewers approached him differently and made him a dramatically better pitcher. Individualization is the buzzword when you talk to development folks, because those people impact that layer below the model, the layer where that individualization is attempted. These coaches don't really impact the model itself. That's kind of a different department. But individualization is so complex because of how multifaceted it is. And I think a good way to understand the complexity is to just think about everything that's happening at release. Slot and hand position are determined by the intent and physiology of the pitcher. That informs what axis you can throw the ball at, with what specific degree of gyro you can do so, based on how much you cut the ball. I know I'm getting into a lot of jargon here. From there, you have a bazillion different orientations that you could throw the ball with that create different movement. These adjustments are all things that I would consider in the ball flight category. The Yankees, Dodgers, Mets, Brewers, Rays all do this exceptionally well. But ball flight is forever linked to things that happen prior to that release. Things in the throw or the delivery, kinematics, which is probably even more complex than ball flight. Some teams do not do the delivery stuff well. The Rays, for example, always get a bad rap for being poor at things not related to ball flight or usage adjustments. The Guardians, on the other hand, were pretty early on Kinetracks. They sent a lot of guys to driveline and embraced that adaptation the league was going to make. And they're considered a team that's very good at delivery adjustments and optimization. Combine ball flight with everything that happens in the delivery, and that's how you individualize to the player. That's easy, right? No, it's not that easy, and you can see how complex it is. The evaluation process of individualizing pitchers is really hard because the models are not the ones doing the individualizing. It's the coaches that come in and interact with the models, interact with the tools, use that information to make players better. And the coaches are the ones that I think stand out the most to me. When I interact with individuals across different organizations, and I'm not saying the body of people I interact with is all-encompassing, but the ones that stand out the most to me are those that can teach. They're the ones that can distill these incredibly complex concepts all wrapped around player development, from workload, programming of throwing programs, ball flight, to kinematics, to the mental side of baseball. They do all of those things at a well above average level. It's not just that they can do all of them. It's that they can do all of them and explain all of them and explain the interaction of those systems to someone like myself in a way that makes me smarter. And I just imagine that if they could do it to me, then taking that information and bringing it down to a player level for them is far easier than the person who has a baseline understanding of all those traits. The two names that I've heard are differentiators in the Brewers org are Chris Hook and Jim Henderson. Hook has been the pitching coach with the Brewers since 2019. He's been in the organization since 2008, spending nearly 11 years in the minors. I read a few pieces on him from The Athletic and watched a recent interview Brian Kenny did, and I'm not going to admit I know his secret sauce, but he clearly layers data and biomech in a very clever way. He talks a lot about moving fast and controlling that movement, making things simple and helping players get better. Now, Jim Henderson pitched with the Brewers from 2009 to 2015, jumped around to a few other orgs, and then started helping with scouting and coaching in the Brewers minor leagues after he signed a minor league contract and was actually on the IL. Kind of a distinct trajectory into an organization. He spent the last couple years as the bullpen coach in MLB. Prior to this season, he was promoted to coordinator. I'm going to take a wild guess here, but specifically at the major league level, when you have individuals that are in places of power who've been in the organization for a very long time, but more importantly have seen the growth of data in the game and been along the ride as the Brewers have likely improved their models tremendously over the last 10 years, those are the most powerful people in an org. It's not the models. Those are the people that I want making decisions. I don't necessarily care even what the model says. I care that Hook and Henderson have an opinion relative to the model, whether it confirms it or denies it, and they're willing to take that down to the player and make them better. That autonomy of decision-making, I think, is incredibly important in organizations. It's not that models are useless. Good models are absolutely essential for an organization. It's how the models are used that make one organization far better than another, when a lot of the information teams are ingesting in baseball is very, very similar. The only differentiator that's left as we come to like a singularity of how much info we can have on all this stuff are the people, are the coaches like Henderson and Hook. And my hot take is that the best coaches are woefully underpaid relative to the value they create. The Angels spent $4 million on a reliever like Drew Pomeranz, who they then DFA because they have no idea how to fix him or why he was good last year in the first place. The ROI on that money is far better if they gave it to a great coach who is given autonomy in that organization. This leads to another organizational structure point that I find kind of curious. The three teams that have the lowest four-seam fastball velocity in the minors are the Brewers, the Mariners, and the Guardians. Two of those teams have been in the bottom half of the league in payroll for each of the past 3 seasons. Velocity is expensive, and yeah, these teams are not going to pay for it. They've created a monetary constraint for so long, it has forced them to understand and develop velocity as efficiently as possible, or more broadly, get creative in making good pitchers. And it's also no surprise that if you were to look at draft spending on pitchers beyond round 5 for organizations over the last 3 drafts, the Guardians are number 5, the Brewers are number 2, and to go back to another low payroll team, the Rays are number 3. Those late round pitchers are the clay that they mold and learn from. And when you have success, players are aware. It becomes the Space Jam water bottle. Enter the org and you will get better, even before any major adjustments are made. You might think there are no examples of this, but oh, there is one massive one this season. Joe Kunal was DFA'd by the Athletics after being bad. The Brewers acquired him for cash. He shows up to the org on June 7th, faces the team that DFA'd him a day later, the Athletics. He strikes out 4 batters, and he's sitting 3 miles per hour higher on his sinker. Now, maybe he was just bitter about the Athletics, who are not that great at developing pitchers relative to the league, but even after that outing, he's still up right now about 1.5 miles to 2 miles per hour. And Chris Hook told Brian Kenny they did nothing to him, which I didn't believe until I confirmed with a source in the org the exact same thing. His delivery looks a little different, but it wasn't driven by the Brewers saying do this or do that. They just have some magic sauce. Multiple things come to mind when thinking about why the Brewers pitching lab is so good. They have a blanket approach that they're willing to individualize beyond when they identify a player who does not fit under that blanket. They have very good coaches that interact with data and models in a way that allows them to have autonomy to make decisions that then trickle down to the player level and make players better, as opposed to deferring to larger things with very small correlations that we all assume will make players better. I think those are probably the 2 main tenets of them as an organization. And yeah, there you go. I solved baseball for you. So, no, I mean, this Brewers team is crazy. They keep churning out pitchers. I didn't even mention like Shane Drohan and some of these other guys who they've made subtle adjustments with. Logan Henderson's a great example. Super efficient 4-seam type. All of a sudden, he can now throw a really good sweeper. There's so many little things they do that are true. And I know I trolled that earlier as being irrelevant, but it all comes from the structure that I talked about in terms of having a blanket approach, individualizing in the correct way, which is through the coaches that can interact with models and actually make players better. So, fun topic to explore. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, thanks for watching.